The dirt on my husband's grave hadn't even settled when my mother-in-law pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. I thought it was a prayer card. It wasn't. It was a check for $2,000 and the name of a clinic on Delwood Avenue. "You can't raise it alone," she said, "and I won't raise it with you." My hand went to my stomach without thinking. 5 months. I was 5 months pregnant, standing in the November mud of a cemetery in Spokane, Washington, in the same black dress I'd worn to my college graduation because I hadn't owned anything else dark enough. My husband had been dead for 11 days. I hadn't eaten a real meal in 4. I looked at her. She was already walking back toward the car. That was the last moment I believed I had anywhere to go. My husband, I'll call him by what he was to me, because his name belongs to something private now, had been a civil engineer for a regional infrastructure firm. We'd met in our mid-20s at a work conference, the kind where nobody actually learns anything and everyone drinks too much hotel coffee. He was funny in a quiet way. He remembered small things. On our 3rd date, he brought up something I'd mentioned offhandedly on our 1st, and I thought, this one pays attention. I married him 18 months later. We'd been trying for a baby for almost 2 years when it finally happened. He was the one who cried at the test. I held it together until I saw him fall apart, and then I couldn't anymore either. We sat on the bathroom floor for a long time. He died on a Tuesday in late October. A work trip to a project site outside Portland. A patch of black ice on the highway at 6 a.m. The other driver walked away. My husband did not. I got the call at 7:43 in the morning. I was still in bed. I remember the exact time because I'd been looking at my phone, deciding whether to get up and make eggs or sleep another 20 minutes. I was always so tired in those months. The pregnancy had made me exhausted in a way I'd never experienced before, this bone-deep, cellular fatigue that started around week 14 and never really lifted. The officer on the phone had a careful voice, practiced. I understood why, later. His mother arrived from Tacoma that same afternoon. She'd never been warm to me. Not unkind exactly, but watchful, in the way someone watches a thing they're waiting to find fault with. When her son was alive, it didn't matter much. He was the buffer. With him gone, there was nothing between us. She moved into the guest room of the house that first night, and I was grateful, genuinely. I couldn't be alone. I barely knew how to use the stove without him there telling me the left burner ran hot, but within a week, the gratitude curdled. She started with small things. The way she referred to my obstetrician as, "that doctor you found." The way she'd walk through rooms and reorganize them, just slightly, so that I'd reach for something and find it gone. She called the baby, the situation, twice in the same conversation. And I told myself she was grieving too. I told myself she didn't mean it. Then, the morning after the funeral, she told me she did. "This house is in my son's name," she said. We were in the kitchen. She was drinking coffee. She hadn't offered to make any for me. "I've already spoken with someone at his firm about the estate. You don't have the means to keep it." I stared at her. "I'm his wife." "You're also unemployed." I'd taken leave from my job as a pediatric occupational therapist 6 weeks earlier. When the pregnancy complications had started, elevated blood pressure, the kind they monitor closely, my doctor had recommended reduced stress. There's a laugh. "And you're going to have a baby," she continued. "That's going to get harder before it gets easier. You need to think practically." "I am thinking practically," I said. "This is my home." She set down her mug. "I've had the locks changed." I think I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because some part of my brain genuinely couldn't process it any other way. "You can't do that. The keys are on the table." She nodded toward a small stack of metal near the fruit bowl. "Those are yours. The others are mine now. I'd like you to be moved out by the end of the week." I want to be very clear about what happened next, because I've told this story before and people always focus on the wrong thing. They say, "Why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you call someone?" And I understand why they ask. From the outside, the answer seems obvious, but I was 5 months pregnant. My husband had been buried 36 hours earlier. I had not slept a full night in 2 weeks. I had no family within 800 miles. My parents were in Florida, elderly, my mother recovering from a hip replacement, my father managing her care and his own bad heart. I had friends, good ones, but scattered. The city of Spokane was a place my husband and I had moved to together for his job 2 years earlier. I was still new enough that the grocery store felt unfamiliar. When you are that untethered, and someone with authority in their voice and a changed lock tells you to leave, something in your nervous system just goes quiet. You don't fight. You pack a bag. That's what you do. I took my maternity clothes, my laptop, my prenatal vitamins, my husband's old flannel shirt that still smelled like him, and the folder where we kept our important documents. I thought about calling a lawyer. I didn't know any lawyers in Spokane. I thought about calling the police, and then I looked at my mother-in-law's face and felt for one nauseating moment that I had no proof of anything. She hadn't hit me. She hadn't threatened me, not in words that would hold up. She'd changed a lock. She'd said things that sounded like practicality. I walked out into a gray November morning with one bag and a paper with a clinic's name on it. I sat in my car for an hour in a gas station parking lot on Division Street. Then I drove. I didn't go to the clinic. I want to say that clearly. I drove past it twice, and I sat at the intersection and looked at the door, and I thought about everything my mother-in-law had said. About means, about practicality, about the situation. And I thought about the morning my husband cried on the bathroom floor. And I kept driving. I ended up at a community health center on the east side of the city. I'd passed it before, on the way to a farmer's market we used to go to on Saturdays, and I'd always noticed the mural on the outside wall, these enormous painted flowers, pinks and oranges, impractical and bright against the concrete. I don't know why I turned in. Maybe because the flowers looked like something my husband would have pointed out. The waiting room was crowded. I sat for almost an hour. When I finally got in to see someone, it was a midwife, not a doctor. A woman in her late 50s named, according to her badge, something beginning with a B. I didn't absorb much in those first few minutes. I remember she had reading glasses pushed up on her head, and she looked at me for a long time before she said anything. "You look like you've had a very bad few weeks," she said. I burst into tears. I hadn't cried yet. Not really. Not since the phone call. Not at the funeral. I'd been so focused on getting through each hour that I'd bypassed the whole thing. But something about being in a medical office, about someone asking about me and not about arrangements or paperwork or the situation, undid me completely. She sat with me for 45 minutes, past the end of her scheduled slot. According to the nurse, who knocked twice. She didn't rush me. She listened to everything. My husband, the funeral, my mother-in-law, the check, the clinic address, the parking lot on Division Street. When I was done, she said, "You have legal rights here, to the house, to his estate, to benefits from his employer. None of what she told you is accurate." She said the house was in his name. Marital property in Washington state is community property. The house is yours. And there are advocacy organizations in this city specifically for situations like yours. She pulled a notepad from her coat pocket and wrote down 3 phone numbers. Then she wrote a 4th. "This one is a family law attorney. She does sliding scale. Call her today, not tomorrow." She also told me something I didn't know. My husband's employer was required to maintain life insurance benefits. And because his death had occurred during a work-related trip, there was a workers' compensation claim that I almost certainly had legal standing to file. "I was not," she said very firmly, "penniless. I had just been told I was by someone who needed me to believe it." I called the attorney from the parking lot. Her name is not important to this story, but she was brisk and clear, and within 10 minutes had confirmed everything the midwife said. She told me to document everything: texts, voicemails, the check, the clinic address, and to return to the house with the non-emergency police line on standby if necessary. "You do not have to leave that house," she said. "You have never had to leave that house." I drove back on a Sunday afternoon. My mother-in-law's sedan was in the driveway. I used the key I still had. the one she hadn't thought to get back from me before she changed the locks, the spare we kept on my keychain, and I walked in through the back door. She was in the living room. She stood up when she saw me. "I spoke with a family law attorney this morning," I said. My voice was steadier than I felt. "I'm not leaving. If you'd like to discuss anything further, you're welcome to speak with her." I put the attorney's card on the coffee table. "I'd also like you to be out by end of the week. I'll give you until Friday, out of respect for your son." She didn't say anything, not right away. Her face went through several things. "You have no idea what you're getting into," she said finally. "I'm starting to figure it out," I said. The weeks that followed were not easy. I want to be honest about that, because these stories sometimes skip to the resolution like a jump cut, and that's not how it actually felt. It felt like wading through something heavy every single day. There were attorney consultations and estate paperwork and a workers' compensation claim that took months to process. There were days when I couldn't get out of bed before noon, and days when I forgot to eat until my body reminded me with a vengeance. There were nights when I lay in the house alone and the silence of it was so specific, so shaped exactly like the absence of one particular person, that I didn't know how I would get to morning. But I did get to morning every time. My husband's employer confirmed the life insurance benefit within 6 weeks. It was not a fortune, but it was enough. The workers' comp claim was settled the following spring. By then, the house was mine, legally documented. Every I dotted. My mother-in-law did leave by Friday. She took several things that weren't hers, some silverware, a lamp, a framed photograph, and my attorney sent a letter. She returned them without comment. I hired a local doula after my regular OB referred me to a practice closer to home. I started going to a grief support group at the community center on Thursday evenings, not because I was ready to talk, but because I needed to be in a room with other people who understood that grief is not something you get over. It's something you learn to carry differently. My daughter was born on a Sunday in late March. The cherry trees outside the hospital had just started to bloom. She was 7 pounds, 4 ounces, and she had her father's ears, which sounds like a small thing and is not. I sat in the hospital bed in the blue light of early morning and held her, and I thought about the parking lot on Division Street, about sitting there for an hour not knowing what to do, about driving past that clinic twice, about turning into the community health center because of a mural of flowers. I thought about what my mother-in-law had said. "You have no idea what you're getting into." She wasn't wrong, exactly. I didn't know. I still don't, not fully. Parenting is a permanent state of not quite knowing, and doing it alone adds a particular texture to that uncertainty. There are bedtimes that break me. There are mornings that feel like gifts. My daughter is now almost 2, and she has opinions about her socks, and a laugh that sounds like something I didn't know I'd been waiting to hear. My mother-in-law has not contacted us. I don't know if she knows her granddaughter exists, or if she's chosen not to ask. That's a door I've left neither open nor closed. If she ever wants to walk through it with honesty and accountability, maybe we'll talk. But I'm not holding space for her in the meantime. I don't have room. I'm busy raising her son's daughter. The attorney I found that Sunday is still my attorney. The midwife at the community health center, I went back, 6 months postpartum, to say thank you. She was on shift. She hugged me. She asked to see a photo. I showed her one of my daughter in the bathtub, covered in soap bubbles, outraged about something. "She looks like a fighter," the midwife said. I told her, "She comes by it honestly." What I know now, that I didn't know in that gas station parking lot, is this: despair is not the same as helplessness. In that parking lot, I felt both, so tangled together I couldn't find the seam. My mother-in-law had counted on me not finding it. She'd handed me a check and an address and trusted that grief and shock and isolation would do the rest. But there were people in that city who had decided to help strangers. A midwife who ran over her scheduled slot. An attorney who picked up the phone on a Sunday and told me the truth in plain sentences. A doula who made house calls. A grief group that didn't ask me to speak until I was ready. None of them were family. All of them held me up. That's the thing nobody tells you about the worst year of your life. It also shows you exactly who shows up. Not always the people you expected. Sometimes a stranger with a notepad and reading glasses pushed up on her head in a clinic with a mural of orange and pink flowers on the outside wall. I still drive past that mural sometimes on the way to the Saturday farmers market. My daughter's in the back seat, strapped in, holding a board book upside down with complete confidence. We go to the market, and we get the same things my husband and I used to get. The honey from the vendor in the green tent, the sourdough from the woman who always undercharges. My daughter reaches for things from her stroller and says words that are almost words. The city feels familiar now. It took 2 years, but it feels like mine. I made it mine.